Thank you very much. And actually, I may start to show you a bit an implementation of what I'm talking about, so it give you a visual idea what this is about. So here I have a few choices. This is a choice of an attacker model, passive reactive, I will explain. This is where composition is where we choose how to compose security controls. I have a constraint budget, so here there is a 9. So I get this selection, I click on compute, and I wait for a little while. And so, yeah, let's finish the calculation. We got these sets of points. If I click one set of points, you can see that something is deployed here. So this is a Pareto front on this side. And each point there corresponds to the Nash equilibrium on a game which has 10 to the power 15 possible pure strategies. And you notice that, so it took like 15 seconds to give all these points, so each solution is solved, each game is solved in under 1 second. So for people that know a bit game theory, I think that's quite significant. What are these solutions? These solutions is what you see there. So if I click on a point, I get something on this side. This is a portfolio, it's a cybersecurity portfolio. It tells me, so implement firewalls strictly, so at the highest possible level. Implement anti-malware policy daily on demand, so at the highest level, and so on. And this is the visual how this portfolio affects the security of the organization in relation to the 37 most common vulnerabilities. So, for example, here, over there, so this is pretexting credentials. So here we are in a sort of phishing kind of vulnerabilities. The gray area is the potential impact of that vulnerability on the organization in terms of data loss and so on. And the red area is the residual security risk once this portfolio is deployed. And so, you see, when as I move on the Pareto front, at this point, I get less red, so it means that I'm more secure. Okay, so what is it about? So let me start now the talk. So this is okay. It's a joint work with Arman Cusani. So for people that have been in these meetings before, so Fabrizio is the guy who did that work on the thermodynamic of confidentiality. Arman is the guy who did that work, presented Fontainebleau on the universally optimal strategies. Well, a few of you will remember Chris Hankin from Imperial, and Andrew. Yeah, cheers, thank you very much. And this is how often I see myself in this kind of meetings, because I don't talk about categories, I don't talk about lots of things that other people talk about, but I survived a few of these meetings. Hopefully I survive today again. And there is compositionality here, so it's essential to get what you just saw. So that's what I'm trying to kind of explain. So, an abstract. Our problem is to consider optimal cybersecurity planning, so it's decision support for cybersecurity. It is an adversarial problem, so there is a defender and there is someone that wants to be bad. So the natural mathematics of adversarial modeling is game theory. So that's what our framework is, essentially game theory. We did also, as part of this project, a real-world evaluation, possibly the largest cybersecurity evaluation to date. So, and that's where this huge number of strategic behavior come along. And as you can see, so we can find an efficient solution to this problem, and that is essentially by reasoning compositionally over security controls. As a timeline, so this project started in 2013. It's the first time actually I talk about this, because until recently I thought we did lots of work, but the scientific value, I felt a bit, well, but now I think there is something interesting to communicate on that. So we started in 2013. We were thinking about approaching large security problems. There were a paper by Janet Wing about network attacks and stochastic game theory, and they're considered around 1 billion possible strategic behavior. We thought, well, maybe we can kind of approach this kind of problems using abstract interpretation or leveraging between some connection between game theory and game semantics. There was some very nice work from Rada, sort of the compositional approach to game theory using game semantics. We then found some inspiring work actually here from California and Texas on use of Stelkerberg games for security problems, not cybersecurity, but real world security like police patrolling and so on. And we started thinking, so in terms of this security game, our games weren't really a zero-sum game, not even a constant-sum game, but we realized around that time that it was reasonable to think of that this game, the payoff matrices were affine transformation of a zero-sum game. And being affine transformation, about the strategies you can reason as in terms of zero-sum games. So that made us thinking that, well, we are not in the wild west of Nash equilibrium, we are in the max, min, min, max universe. So let's try to think more in terms of optimization. And we did a nice work, a little work with Fabrizio in 2015, introducing, so formulating this problem as a specific knapsack combinatorial optimization. So it was a multi-objective, multiple choice binary knapsack. But then, yeah, this year, so that was the big step, was this year by converting so this framework faithfully, so we don't need even abstract interpretation, is the real deal, the real game, to mixed integer linear programming. And the solution that you just saw are subgame perfect Nash equilibria. So there are Nash equilibria, there are Stelkerberg solutions, and there are also optimization, MILP solutions, optimal. The context is cybersecurity. So we all know, well, what in cybersecurity controls are. So for example, controls could be encryption, access control, firewalls, patching, and so on. There are many of these things around. Each one of these things can be implemented at different level of intensity. So your organization may have a password to change every 3 years. Another organization may have a different policy, more stringent, change password every year. Yeah? So there are different levels and have a very big implication on the security of the organization. So you say, well, if we want to find the best possible solution, why don't we take all possible controls, all implemented at the highest level of intensity? Well, two big no's to that. So first is that you may not have the money to buy all controls. Controls need, for example, you need a system administrator time, so salaries to pay for the maintenance of these processes, or there are some capital investment. But even if you had all the money, you still wouldn't want everything at the highest level. Think about password policy. So you may think that as you have a more stringent policies on password, change password, say, every week in relation to every year, that improve the security of your organization. But imagine that every week, the time that people have to waste in changing their password, the help desk that have to assist people that forget their new password, and those, we call that indirect costs. So you can never factor out the indirect costs when you think about cybersecurity. So the context, the kind of framework that we want to formalize is a multi-objective optimization, where the objective that we want to minimize is the security risk, so how much the organization is exposed to a risk of being attacked, but also we want to minimize the direct cost, and also we want to minimize the indirect cost, so how much the organization is affected by security measures at a particular level. Typically, these things in optimization may be solved by reducing to a unique optimization by taking a weighted sum of these three objectives. We don't want to do that because these are very heterogeneous in nature. These are kind of probabilistic costs. These are monetary costs. These are social monetary costs. So we think that a better approach is to instead consider the Pareto frontier, so where we have the solutions where this objective, you cannot improve in any of the objectives without disadvantage the other two. So the best compromise. And that's what you saw in that thing there before. As an attacker, so you remember those two key selection of passive and reactive in the tool. So passive is the most common kind of attacker profile, is the script that are around the web that look for SQL vulnerabilities and so on. So they don't target a specific organization. So we can see this as following general statistics. So the most attacks are SQL injections. So the reactive is a more sophisticated attacker, is the one that, for example, a cyber criminal look for organization and he spends some time probing the system defense. And then he attacks where he found the weakest link. So this is, as in cybersecurity, well, security is as strong as your weakest link. The reactive attacker is the most sensible possibly point of view. And that's one of the difference in this optimization in relation to, say, financial engineering. Financial engineering is not really adversarial, so that is their main objective. Security, the main objective should be here in the reactive. But we have both models in our system. Here is compositionality. So we have a way, a sort of mapping, if we take access control, crypto, pen testing, to say how much that control affect specific vulnerabilities. But then, I mean, we have to combine in a plan. So if we have, say, suppose a set of vulnerabilities that are relevant for a set of controls that are relevant for a specific vulnerability, and if we know the values for each control, how can extract something meaningful about their combination against that vulnerability? So how we can compose their efficacy. And here, so we went through three possible approaches. The first is the most linear of the three is where to assume that the efficacy adds up, capped to a certain maximum. But that this clearly overestimates, in most cases, the combined efficacies of controls. Then we considered a highly nonlinear composition, which is a multiplicative, things independently combined. So if a vulnerability has to pass through all controls that may affect that vulnerability. But this again still brings some overestimation. What we found out actually, and then we had a sort of soft validation of this thing on the real data, is the best of seems to be a really reasonable combination of approaches. In the best of, so if you have a set of controls that may affect a vulnerability, you take the most effective of the lot as their combined efficacy. So, to some extent, well, there you may underestimate a tiny bit, but you catch the one by need. Yeah? So it's a sort of a by need, and the capture correlation of different controls against the same vulnerability. The point is that none of this is really linear. And actually, here is the product of objective variables. So it's really highly unlinear. So our main contribution was to convert a nonlinear multi-objective optimization into a mixed integer linear programming for all possible attacker model and composition that you saw there. This is a very practical application because previous to this, so there was some study that were using genetic algorithms, but we did that too. And if you take something like a optimization solver non-linear, like a genetic algorithm, for 10 to the 15 possible strategies, the solution takes weeks. And it doesn't even guarantee that it's optimal, but you're stuck on a local optima. So, whereas you saw that by using a milk translation, we can solve this problem in 1 second. So it's going from something that you cannot use to something that you can use basically in real time, as you just saw. And that comes from, from this data evaluation that we had from real data, also in collaboration with people from GCHQ that So let me just give you a little bit some intuition how these things work. So we have controls. For each control, we have a set of possible level of intensity that can be implemented. And a cybersecurity plan is just a bit vector on the space of control times control, so the control time level. So that bit is 1 if that control at that level is implemented, is chosen, and is 0 if not. We have a budget, security budget, and then we have functions for direct cost, indirect cost, and the security risk. And the problem statement is just to minimize so these quantities subject to the budget constraint. So the costs are additive. We make the assumption, well, this is like sometimes in economics, we make this sort of assumption, but here is the formalization of the different composition options. So in the additive, so we take the success rate of a vulnerability given a portfolio, a chosen portfolio, is 1 minus the sum of all the effectiveness of that chosen portfolio on that control V, capped to this between 0 and 1. For the multiplicatives, the success rate of a vulnerability is the product of the success rate for each control that is relevant for that vulnerability. And in the best of model, the success rate of a vulnerability for a portfolio is the minimum success rate along all the relevant control for that vulnerability. And so that is the best of. The attackers, so the attacker model, we have the 2 different models. So the passive, so that is an expectation. So that is the expected security loss given that portfolio. So this is the potential security loss. This is the success rate, and this is the probability of that vulnerability happening. So this is the classical kind of risk management. But this, as we say in the security, we really want to look for the weakest link. So that is the model. So in the weakest link is we pick the vulnerability that has the highest success rate. And this is how all this connects formally to game theory. So we think of these frameworks give us a 2-person game, a leader and a follower. The leader is the defender. He plays first, and then the attacker observes the defense and makes his choice. And so now if we think the sub-game perfect Nash equilibria in this game, then each one of these is a point in the Pareto front. And conversely, each point in the Pareto front corresponds to a strategy for the leader in the sub-game perfect Nash equilibria, where the cost, the game is defined by the specific cost for that point, direct and indirect costs associated to that point.
So this is just a 2-move game?
It is, yes. Yes. So you deploy the defense, and the attacker observes what you have in place and decide what to attack. So these are the, say, the 2 different possible approach for the multi-objective. So this is the weighted combination, and this is the one that actually generates the Pareto front. But still, because of the possible composition non-linear, all this is a highly non-linear problem. But so I'm going to show you now, this is an example. So this is the model, the one that you saw calculated in the tool. So it solved this problem, is the best of reactive optimization. And so how do we make that problem, which is not linear, because the maximum between optimization variables is not linear, into a linear? We introduce some flow variables that linearize the problem. So basically, for each vulnerability and a possible control some level in that vulnerability, affecting that vulnerability, we introduce a new variable, YVCL, with the constraint that that variable is 0 and upper bounded by XCL. So what this constraint says? This constraint says that if a control at a certain level is not peaked, so this is 0, then the flow has to be 0. Yeah? And then the other constraints on the flow variables is that given a vulnerability, the sum of the flows has to sum to 1. This means that that some of the flows has to be non-zero. So the minimization engine, he has to pick some of the flows, and as he's minimizing the security risk, he's going to pick the one that has the lowest success rate for the vulnerability. So he solved the max problem by just introducing these flow variables. There are other tricks, and so this is the simple. For the multiplicative linearization, there are a bunch of flow variables that need to be introduced. And so it's much more complex, but this is the kind of the general spirit. So let me conclude. So for this problem, thinking compositionality and solving linearization of nonlinear problems allow us to solve complex strategic problems efficiently. Well, have you saw that? We can linearize capped, additive, multiplicative, best-of compositional control and their custom mixture. So we can also do if you have against a vulnerability, controls combine multiplicative against another vulnerability, they combine best-of. Is not a problem, we can do that. Interestingly, so we run experiments on this, and so the best-of reactive model is the portfolio that came out there is basically the same that is recommended in the literature from GCHQ and the SANS institutes. So it kind of match the experts' recommendations. So this compositionality aspect, so how security control compose, is actually one of the things that people are really interested in the security community. We have explored those three possible compositions. We don't know if there are other compositionality principles that may be relevant. So this is a matter of research. And also, we don't know if these flow variables that allow to linearize this kind of nonlinear problems there is a general theory of for these flow variables. We know how to do for those kind of compositions. We don't know the full landscape. And that's all for me.
Please.
What engine do you use to solve the mixed integer linear program? Do you use iLog or do you implement? How do you solve it? What system do you use to solve?
Oh, it's just we use pulp in Python. It's pretty much the syntax. So in pulp, the syntax is it's gone. I don't know how to go back. It allows you to write things pretty much reflecting the mathematical definition. So we don't have to write matrices.
Do you have other ways of combining success rates for the different measures other than the three that you mentioned there?
Well, no, that is, at the moment our landscape is there.
For example, often the problem is you have that they conflict with each other instead of they help each other sometimes. One measure could cancel another one out.
Yes, we haven't explored all possible,
So, one can imagine an iterated version of this game, right? So where I gradually roll out stronger and stronger security profiles as the opponent reveals more and more of it. So, I start with no security, the opponent attacks, breaks my system, then I roll out more. Okay, so you get an iterated version of this game. Do you know if you have good equilibria in that iterated game?
No, so this one of our next development is kind of a feedback loops and sensors so that we can study that. Yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you sort of validated what your program is doing against the existing recommendations. Has it led to sort of some new or surprising conclusions by applying it to other data?
Well, so far no, but the thing is that in the tool we hardwired is kind of the model for a specific organization, and we kept that as a generic SMEs. So that is why kind of we match the official recommendation, because the official recommendations are also geared towards this generic. But yeah, our next development is to kind of have a sort of interface where a company with a specific profile, a specific architecture, a specific kind of set of machine and a specific threat enter those, and then it will have a custom-made solution for that organization. And there we would expect, so this is what, the generic recommendation from expert, they cannot do. So our idea is that eventually we can provide a tool to provide customer recommendation for organizations. So there, I think we will see something more exciting and surprising from a practical point of view.
I also have another short question if there's time. I mean, so you're sort of, one would kind of expect that you could get a good linear approximation to a nonlinear problem, but you seem to be getting an exact solution.
This is an exact solution.
That seems quite surprising. Can you give some idea of how one can understand how this is achieved? I mean, very briefly.
Well, I mean, for this, so why is this the max? Because you can only select if the particular optimization variable is selected. Yeah? So if that is not selected, the flow has to be 0. And then for a given vulnerability, you have to also satisfy these constraints that the exit flow has to 1. So you need to have some of these y's equal to 1. So, well, now the engine is looking to minimize this problem. So he has to, which one, if he has to pick, is going to pick? He's going to pick the one that is consistent with minimization objective, which is the most effective.
Yeah, I mean, right. It's the multiplicative constraint that you're hitting that seems the more surprising, but maybe we should...
Yes, the multiplicative constraint is actually much more involved. Yeah, yes, absolutely.